Okay, today we're going to continue with Kohlberg. If you remember, let's go to the PowerPoint. If you remember, we were talking about conventional reasoning. And at conventional reasoning, the key to conventional reasoning is that it's no longer the individual above and beyond the rules and the laws. I'm going to get what I want when I want, but rather the rules and the laws are now the norms, and one makes decisions by looking at that and by looking at how one's conforming to rules, laws, and norms. Now, at stage 3 of the conventional level, morality consists of following the rules and norms of the group, identifying with a group. And those who do not follow them or cannot meet group standards are considered to be evil or not worthy of respect. Okay? I have here, come back to me, I have here in my hands the lyrics to the Jet song from West Side Story. You know West Side Story? West Side Story is a musical written in the late 1950s about two gangs in New York. And it's a Romeo and Juliet type story, for those who don't know it, right? The gym, the school gym is neutral territory, and at the school gym in this magic moment, Tony from the Jets looks at Maria from the Sharks, and there's instant magic, and they fall in love. Maria, I just met a girl named Maria, and suddenly I found how wonderful a sound can be. Don't worry, I'm going to sing a lot this time. Okay? Don't panic. There's no charge for concerts. Those are part of the tuition. Okay? So, and the Sharks are a Puerto Rican gang in New York, a gang of Puerto Ricans. And the Jets are sort of they're never identified nondescript previous generation immigrants, and they have names like Biff, and Action, but the character who falls in love with Maria is Tony. So there's a hint that they're maybe an Italian gang. But anyway, case they hate each other, and of course, you know what finally happens, they fall in love in the end. In the end, Maria doesn't die, but Tony does. There are misunderstandings, and of course, Maria is the brother of the leader of the rival gang. Maria is the sister of the leader of the rival gang, and Tony is someone who was a leader of the Jets, and most of the action focuses on the Jets, right? It's told from perspective of the Jets, of the Jets, and the Jets are right, but he's trying to get out of it. And people don't believe it. How can it be? Okay? And the play opens with a Jets song. And it's a perfect demonstration of stage 3 reasoning, how you live your life. I will sing parts of it, and I will show you what's going on here. It goes, when you're a jet all the way from your first cigarette to your last dying day. So it's there. And in this case, since you're not born into being a jet, it's there forever. There are certain things you have to do. Remember, we're talking about the 50s. So, as a matter of fact, the thing starts in a knife fight. In a knife fight where what's the name of the head of the Sharks, Maria's brother? Bernardo. Bernardo kills the head of the Jets, who is, right, Tony's best friend. And Tony has gone to break it up. He and Maria have talked. And in a fit of upset, he turns around and he kills Bernardo. Okay? He kills the head of the gang, right? So, in a knife fight. A fight that was supposed to be with fists turns into a knife fight. That's how horrible it was. Drive-by shootings and things like that were just unheard of in those days, right? So you're defying authority. You're from your first cigarette, you're smoking. And that makes you a member. When you're a jet, let them do what they can. You've got brothers around. You're a family, man. Right? We're in this together. You're never alone. You're never disconnected. You're home with your own. When company's expected, that's the Sharks, you're well protected. Then you are set with a capital J, which you'll never forget till they cart you away. When you're a jet, you stay a jet. I can sing it better than that, but okay. And now there's sort of like a soliloquy. There's a soliloquy here in which the Jets are talking to each other. Tony has won't participate. He said, now I know Tony like I know me, and I guarantee you can count him in, out, let's get cracking, says the other guy. In other words, it can't be that Tony doesn't want to be a Jet anymore. Tony's looking for beyond these gang fights and gangs war. Where are you going to find Bernardo at the dance tonight at the gym? They're talking this. In other words, they're going to go and challenge him. At the gym, you're not allowed to fight. That's neutral territory. Okay, so they're going to go and they're going to meet at 10. We're Jets, and it says, we're going to walk. We always walk tall. We're Jets, the greatest. When you're a Jet, you're the top cat in town, the gold medal kid with a heavyweight crown. When you're a Jet, you're the swingin'est thing. We're the best. We're the best. Little boy, you're a man. Little man, you're a king. So by being part of us, it makes you better. Right? That's how you get your worth. Right? The Jets are on gear. Our cylinders are clicking. The Sharks will steer clear, because every Puerto Rican's a lousy chicken. And the people who are out, they stink. They're no good. Right? Now, what's obvious in the dialogue, they don't think that every Puerto Rican is a chicken, right? They know that it's a gang and they're fighting over turf, etc. There's another place that's no, I take it back. The candy shop's not neutral. That's Jet territory. But still, they're all no good. We're tough. We're the tops. Being part of us makes you better. And everyone who's an out, right, in this case, they can identify the Puerto Rican gang, are no good. Okay? And there's also a sense that because of our superiority, we can do things to others that, okay? Here come the Jets like a bat out of hell. Someone gets in our way. Someone don't feel so well. We don't care. We're coming, and if you're in our way, we can do what we want to you. Okay? Here come the Jets, little world, step aside. Better go underground, better run, better hide. You see, we're going to be on the top. We're hanging a sign, says visitors forbidden, and we ain't kidding. You're either in or you're out. Here come the Jets, and we're going to beat every last gang on the whole, every last buggin gang on the whole damn buggin block, street, whatever it is. Okay, that's it. That's a perfect summary, or a very good summary, of stage 3 reasoning. Okay? You're in, you're out. In this case, there's certain ways you have to be and think. It's almost inconceivable to them that someone like Tony, who was a leader of the gang, is not interested anymore. He's looking for something different. He has a song, Come On Something. Something's grand is coming. The air is humming, and something grand. I don't know what it is, but it is going to be great. He's rejecting this already. He's looking for something higher. And if you see the interactions between him and Maria, he keeps sneaking into the Puerto Rican neighborhood to meet her, right? There's a purity about all of it, and an attempt to rise above this. Anybody know the play? There's a place for us, right? Somewhere a place for us, peace and quiet and open air. We'll find a new way of living. We'll find a way of forgiving. They're trying to rise above this, to say it's not us and them, okay? And their love is going to do it. Hold my hand and we're halfway there. Well, it doesn't work, but that's the idea. He's trying to rise above this. Okay? So, this is stage 3. You're in or you're out. If you're in, there are rules that apply to you, who you are, what you are. And if you're out, you're just somebody else. Now, this in and out can be drawn very broadly or very narrowly. I'll give you an example. Anybody ever turn on the Olympics and see a sport you never saw before? You don't know much about it, right? You don't care about it. And all of a sudden, there's an American competing. Oh, yeah, let's go, baby, right? You're for the American, right? That's your drawing lines broadly as Americans, right? And the question of how you draw these lines becomes important. I'll give you an example. The internment of the Japanese. Well, let me say one other thing before. Sometimes there's nothing you can do personally right? Either what you have to do personally to become in is an enormously difficult decision in your life, or there's nothing you can do. So if you're a member of this religious group, you're in. If you're not, you're out. Well, people from other religious groups, I guess they could come in, but it's very difficult to make those kinds of decisions. Or the Klan. There's some people, there's just nothing they can do to get in, right? you know, all the people, white America and this and that, et cetera, okay? And you begin to hear this, right? I mean, that's how the Nazis worked. That's how the Nazis worked. Right? You're in if you're Aryan purity, right? And then they had people ranked from inferior to cockroaches, human vermin. That's how they, the Jews and the Gypsies and a few others, where they were human vermin to them. The Slavs were Untermensch, they were second rate, right? And either you were in or you were out that way, okay? So I probably shouldn't tell you this. I'm playing chess online, and I have a name, and somebody asked me what my name meant. So I said it's a Yiddish word. Yiddish is the language that the Jews in Eastern Europe spoke. So he said to me, "What is that language?" And I explained that to him. And he said to me, "You're Jewish?" He didn't even know where I was, right? I'm playing on Yahoo. It's all over the world, right? So, and then he said, he said, "I'm a Palestinian and you subhumans stole our land from us." That's already, right? It's not, we have political angers with you, right? By the way, that's not true. Nobody stole anything, but that's a different story, okay? You're subhumans. So those are that's what gets frightening. Okay, now you don't have to put it that way, but then it becomes difficult. What are you going to do? There's nothing I can do to change my ethnic background. That's he didn't ask me for my political opinions. I'm right. What? Yeah, I won the game, by the way. We were talking, and then I made a move, and I bought him, and he took off. But that was a different story. But it was. It's not like it. He didn't ask me, well, what do you think? I'm very much for compromise and for settling this thing, and but it didn't matter to him, right? One other interesting phenomenon here. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Often, what's moral, what the people who are in do, is determined by a powerful leader. Okay, this is where cults come from. Okay. A powerful leader decides what's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, who you are and what you are, okay? Come back to me for a second. So we have, I don't know if any of you remember, many years ago, something called Jonestown. There was a Reverend Jones, who doesn't know about it? Yeah, you probably don't know about it. What? Where was it? Push it down? Yeah.
Where was it?
It actually happened in British Guyana. What happens there, in California, there was somebody named Jones who was the leader of a church, which soon turned to be pretty cultic, like a cult, and he began to get into trouble, I guess, with the IRS, right, or something, and about, his money, etc. So he made a deal with, what's it called now? It's Guyana, which used to be British Guyana. So it's an English-speaking country in South America, and they gave him a plot of land there to go and farm, and he kept getting into trouble down there, and finally the IRS was still after him, etc. So one day he decides that they're all going to commit mass suicide, and he whips up a bunch of Kool-Aid with arsenic in it, poison Kool-Aid, and he tells all of the followers to give and they knew what it was. He didn't lie to them. Take the Kool-Aid, give it to your children, then drink it yourself and we'll be gone, right? A few of them, they were way in the middle of the jungle. I mean, the Guyanese government saw this as a chance. There are some people ready to go anywhere, do anything, to perhaps do some development in the jungle, right? So they were in the middle of nowhere, basically. And a few of them ran into the jungle, but most of them gave this Kool-Aid to their children, drank it themselves. It was a mass suicide. And he, by the way, he killed himself. I think he shot himself. I'm not sure. Push it down. Say it again.
He took the easy way out.
Yeah, the easy way out. Well, maybe. For him, it was the easy way. For him, it may be the easy way out. But what about them? He's the leader. He decides what you do. Whatever he says to do is the right thing to do. Okay? And it becomes a matter of, I told you about my son's shoes, didn't I?
Yeah.
I told you about buying the shoes. You have to have Vans. You have to buy this. You have to dress this way and act this way and like this thing. I told you about going and seeing Holly after all these years and bringing her the Elvis record, right? It's you know, you have to pretend. You have to be in or out. And the inness or outness makes a difference. And you get, here, let's go back to the PowerPoint, stereotyping. Every Puerto Rican's a lousy chicken, right? That's just how they are, okay? And the only way to settle disagreements are by attacking or shunning the nonconformer and by intergroup conflict, okay? Like the Sharks and the Jets. We're going to fight. We're this and you're that. This stuff is amazingly powerful. Woodrow Wilson admitted, look, during World War I, the United States tried very hard to stay neutral, okay? And both sides didn't like it. The United States at that time was starting to become a major manufacturing power, was a huge source of natural resources in the world, right? The iron and stuff, the Mojave Range in the north. I mean, people said there's an endless supply of iron ore there. It turned out not to be true, but in the early part of the century, it looked like that. And so everybody was jumping American boats. Because the United States eventually entered on the side of the allies, the French and the Germans, we hear the story about the Lusitania, etc. But there was one time when Wilson told the British, if you don't stop boarding our boats and stealing all the stuff and pounding all the stuff, we're going to declare war on you. Okay? Because anything that was going to Germany or Austria, right, who were the Central Powers, the British wouldn't let it go. Okay, but finally Wilson admitted, he sort of came to this decision, we can't stay neutral, that one of the reasons he decided to go on the side of the Allies instead of the Central Powers was because the sense of kinship he had with England, and that we were an English-speaking nation, and our culture came from England. I mean, that's true, okay? A sense of kinship. You have things like the Organization of African Unity and the Arab League, countries that are fighting with each other all the time, right? Have had wars with each other, but there's still a sense of unity. Right? Because they're us and they're them, things around, right? Yeah, go ahead.
We found that a lot after 9/11. Like, you know, everybody was together.
Exactly.
All together, everybody came together.
After 9/11, I walked in and I was giving one of my tirades, questioning multiculturalism, which I'm about to do here. And I walked in and I said, the first words out of my mouth, the first class after 9/11 was actually, now do you believe we're all in this together? It was the first words out of my mouth, right? Because, you know, we're all Americans together. People who flew in those planes, they didn't care what your religion was, what your ethnic background was. We're just out to get America, okay? So that was that feeling of uniting, right, and coming together of this. Now, stage 2 people, oh boy, was that an opportunity. You don't know how many phony charities popped up after that, based on this feeling of wanting to give and help and aid, right? You can't imagine, right? People just stealing. That's typical stage 2. Oh boy, I'm going to exploit people now. I'm going to get them, okay? And you see this, and some of it is interesting. I am convinced that part of the reason that, right, if you looked at the emotion behind taking in all the people, I'm from Katrina, which I don't know how long ago it happened. When I'm broadcasting this, I hope people remember the destruction of New Orleans, right? Those people went all over the place. But if you listened to what people were saying in Houston, what the mayor said and some of the other people, there was a feeling we're in this together. There but for fortune. We're right on the coast. That thing could have hit and killed us too, right? Done mass damage to us, destroyed Houston. Now, we're a little bit off the coast. And it was right after Allison, which had really done horrible damage in Houston, right? So there's this sense of in this togetherness, right? That was not quite the same, although a lot of people went to other places, but that was, right, there wasn't this opening of arms in the same way. okay? And so these are the kinds of things that happen when you feel in this together. Unfortunately, this leads to a lot of things like stereotyping, a feeling it's us and them, and a feeling there are lines that just can't be crossed. You're this, we're that, and judging people by what group they're in. We're the best, the Sharks are the worst. We're great, you're bad. And there's a sense of people having to prove who and what they are. So I'll give you an example. During World War II, I'm sure a lot of you know, I hope all of you know, that the Japanese Americans on the West Coast, not any place else in America, but on the West Coast, were put in internment camps. They were thrown out of their homes. They were locked up. Now, it is true that there were pro-Japanese organizations operating on the West Coast. I can't remember what they were called. The Dragons, I think. And they were basically pro-Japanese in the war. And after Pearl Harbor was bombed, there was suspicion that they were actually working to help the Japanese. But they were a small minority of the Japanese Americans. But they were all locked up and put in internment camps. And they were, we used to have someone on the faculty who actually, she was very young. She's retired now, obviously. She taught in one of those camps. They were sent mostly to the Northwest. I think she was in Montana where she taught. Anyway, there was a debate on the floor of Congress. Well, let me give you one more piece of history. Some of the people in those camps, there were a lot of people in those camps who never seen Japan. They were second, third, fourth generation Americans, right? Soldiers from that camp, they volunteered to join the American Army, right? They asked to join the Army. So, as a matter of fact, there's a story where they went down for basic training in Biloxi, speaking of stereotyping by groups. Okay, they were sent for basic training. If anybody saw Biloxi Blues, okay, about the Neil Diamond going down to Mississippi. So I think it was in Biloxi. But anyway, they were in the South, and there was a group of them. They were kept together, and they went for basic training down there, and they go to the bathroom. And it says, white's bathroom, colored's bathroom. They stood outside. They didn't know what to do, know which bathroom to go into, right? Shows you how ridiculous the stereotyping is. And in the end, I think they were made honorary whites. I don't know why, but they were allowed to go. They went into the whites' bathroom. They took them away. But in any case, they eventually became, they were sent to Europe, of course. Because, God forbid that they should go. Maybe a few of them know Japanese. We should send them there. Right? They were sent to Europe, and they were the most highly decorated unit in World War II. They were involved in the invasions in Italy, and later, after going through all that, they were involved in D-Day, and they were a highly decorated unit. I think they were the most decorated unit. There's an interesting old-time film, and their officers were quote-unquote white, about these soldiers in World War II, and Van Johnson. He's still around. He's an old man. I don't know, but I shouldn't say that. I hope he'll still be around, even if this tape runs many years. But anyway, he plays their officer, and it's a very pro show, but it's historically pretty accurate. It shows all the battles in which they fought in Italy and Europe. In any case, there's a debate on the floor of Congress about whether to keep the Japanese locked up in internment camps or whether to let them go, let them out. So one congressman who's for it says, it's the House of Representatives, one representative who's for it, he said, there's a yellow peril in the world. I don't know how Asians got to be yellow, but that's what they used, right? You're yellow. There's whites, blacks. Americans became reds and Asians became yellow. I don't know how that happened, but it's all this silly stuff. But in any case, there's a peril. The Japanese are a peril. By virtue of being Japanese, you're a danger to the world. The fact you're born on American soil, it's irrelevant. And until this danger is crushed, we've got to keep them locked up, at least that long, right? Then there's another congressman who gets up. He says, wait a minute, another representative, he said, they proved with their blood, this was after many of these battles where they were so heroic, right? They were really, they were known even at the time as being a very heroic unit and being put in volunteering often for the toughest situations and performing, very well. They proved with their blood. They died for the flag. They died for the flag. That's how they did it, right? So by their actions, they proved they're Americans. Now, you notice what's missing from this. What about the Constitution? What about their rights? You can't deprive people of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Well, you can, right? Lincoln did it too if there's a clear and present danger to the country. Right? Those are different arguments, right? But there's nothing legal about this. There's no appeal to this. It's just, are they good folks or not? One of the things, quite frankly, that bothers me about what often passes for multiculturalism is the tremendous amount of stereotyping. Oh, Asians are good at math. And Mexicans don't do this too well, but they do that better. And these people do this, and those people do that. I had one student, she was a graduate student. She said, she was Chinese American. She said, I was born and raised here. Said, you know, she said, this is a quote from her. She said, I suck at math. That's a quote. She said, and I can't get help. Every time I go for help, she said, it's sort of like perfunctory. Oh, well, here, they go, wait, because I'm Asian, I must be great at math. She said, you know, people just make that assumption because of what I look like. All the stupid things, right? So, you know, oh, you know, Mexican Americans, what are some of the stereotypes? If I remember, I heard that when I first moved down here. You know, I don't know. What? They won't look you straight in the eye. I heard that one. They're told not to look adults straight in the eye, and that gets other people upset because they keep saying, look me in the eye. I guess that one's gone because it was so silly. You know, and I told you about my son playing Steven in basketball, didn't I? Right? Well, he's tall and he's black, so he must be great in basketball. Right? So, you know, all these, and you know, my son said, you know, they just assume he's going to beat them. Right? And by the way, the other side of it was, because I told my son and Steven played basketball for hours on end in one of their two backyards. My son got a reputation as being the world's greatest basketball player because he could beat Steven consistently, right? Because, you know, and my son said, he's just not that good. He's okay. But, oh, people get intimidated by him. That's stereotyping people by who they are and what they are, making assumptions about people, okay, because of their ethnic background. And this multiculturalism is basically saying, in many cases, it boils down to, you're this culture, you're that culture. And as Rudyard Kipling said, east is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. I consider that particularly dangerous. Yeah, go ahead.
I have people talking louder to me because of my hair.
Because your hair?
Color of my hair.
Oh, because blonde. She's blonde, by the way. Here, put a camera on her so you can see. You got it? Why? Because this. You got it? Can you put a camera on her? Hello? There she is. Show us your hair. There you go. Okay? What's it, the blonde bimbo thing? Is that the idea? Unbelievable. You've got to watch out for these stereotypes. You've got to watch out for them. And this group's stupid, and this group's cheap, and this group's this, and this group's that. And you've got to watch out for it. And some of the stuff, now culture does make a difference. Some of the stuff we do, like, somebody tell me some of the multicultural activities you've been told to do in your classroom. I know it's going to come up. Come on, tell me. Who's been told you have a day where people from different cultures bring in the food from their cultures? You've all been told that one, right? That's the standard one. But what do you do when somebody from Mexican-American background brings in refried beans and lard, and the Muslim and Jewish kids, you know, they're going to ask, what's in it? I'm not going to eat it. They won't eat pigs, right? What happens if you don't like the food from another culture? I was reading an article in American Heritage magazine how the first pizzeria chain in Chicago, I can't remember the name of it now, it's a known chain, they make pizza more like old European pizza, was opened up because one of the partners wanted to open a Mexican restaurant, which were very unusual, especially in the North, in the 50s. And the partner said, okay, they went to go, then he tasted the food and he hated it. So he went to Europe. They wanted to have some offbeat food, see if they could do it. And he bumped into pizza, and they opened up the pizza place instead because that's a food they both agreed they liked. Okay? I remember when I was a kid, I'd never eaten pizza. It was in the 50s was just coming into, whoa, what is it? Woo, I love that food, right? So and by the way, the pizza we eat in America is a distinctly American food. Just like chow mein is an American food and bagels are an American food, okay? So you have to, okay, there's pizza in Italy, but it doesn't taste like American pizza. So, as I found out when I went there, I like American pizza better. Okay, so I could tell you. So you have to be, how did I get off on this? I was just reading that pizza article this morning, that's why I got. So what happens if somebody doesn't like the food from another culture? Then what? I had a friend when I was in Israel. We drove I take it back, 45 minutes out of the way to go to the best restaurant, right? He had been raised in Hungary, to get his favorite food, pickled calves' feet. Feet. Now, it sounds bad, but it tastes worse. I never tasted a food I hated more. He was glad because he took mine and devoured it. Apparently, in Eastern Europe, that's considered, especially among poor people. I come from very poor backgrounds, considered a delicacy. Nobody wants the feet, you throw them away. So he took it. I didn't like it. Okay? Go ahead.
Growing up, I had a best friend, and every time we'd invite her over to eat, she would eat first and then come on and be like, I'm not hungry.
You're right.
Because she didn't like the food we ate.
You didn't like the food, right. There's, even in my synagogue, most of the people there are from Eastern European background, but there's one guy who's from, there's an old Jewish community in Iran and Iraq. They were there since the time the Second Temple was destroyed. And there's one guy who's from Iran. And smoked fish, smoked herring, and smoked salmon is, considered, that's the Jews from Eastern Europe eat that. And so afterwards, we go after the Sabbath, you go and you have a little, you're supposed to say a blessing over wine to God. So you do that and you have a little snack. And he's a friend of mine. He's a rabbi. I go to him and I ask him questions. He won't let me stand next to him if I have that fish in my plate. Cannot stand the smell of it. Right? He says, get this away from me, right? So now what, right? And we tease him, right? So he teases us back. So what if you don't like the food? There's nothing wrong with not liking the food. Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's more important to just teach kids to respect when other kids are eating something they don't like. Because a lot of the kids that I work with are like, ew, I can't believe you're going to eat that. That's disgusting. I'm like, kids... Right. And not to me, because I'm so picky, I won't eat anything. Right? But, I mean, I'm like, guys, don't be rude.
It's important for people to understand that people eat different things and do different things. But it's also important to understand that if you were to offer me, right, what food you want to eat, I go for pizza, even though I don't have Italian background, right? I love pizza. See, you can tell. Okay, good stuff. Okay, and there are foods from my own ethnic background I like, and foods from my own ethnic background that I don't like. Anybody know about borscht? Yeah. Beets. It's boiled beets in a soup. Like you boil it and you put it in a soup, and then you put sour cream or sometimes a potato in it. Oh, I can't stand it, right? Oh, my mother and her sister, right? That's what they ate in Russia, right? Before the communists kicked them out. Okay? And they made it here, that kind of stuff. Okay? And sometimes when I got to Israel, there was a food called bamia. Oh, man, did I love that food. I'd never seen it before. I didn't know what it was. I used to devour it in every way, shape, and form that it was cooked. I came back to America, and I went into the stores. Bamia said, we don't know what you're talking about. And for years, one day I'm in the supermarket, and I see a can, and I looked at the picture on the can. Bamia! It's okra, right? In Hebrew, it's called bamia. It's okra. Right? And by the way, I looked in the dictionary and it's not in there. Apparently it's a slang. It's slang. And I just didn't know what it was, right? Okra. So now fried okra. Oh, man, I must have bought 12 cans and just devour them, right? So And it's obviously not traditional food. I learned to eat it when I moved to the Middle East. So these kinds of things, it depends. You do have to have respect for other people's traditions. But the one thing you have to remember, the one question that you have to ask, when I got here, when I got to school, I went to a school where almost everybody's parents, almost everybody's grandparents were immigrants. Not everybody's, but almost, when I was in elementary school. Some of us, like my mother was an immigrant, my father wasn't, right? All of us were the children of immigrants. None of us had family that went back before 1900. We'd all come, mostly from Europe, right? And the teacher got up and said, we're Americans. George Washington, the father of your country. The rights that are put to Americans, they're for you too. We're in this together. There were ethnic tensions, right? And the teachers would say no. And to me, this kind of thing that says you have that culture, you have this culture, it's frightening to me. I'll tell you something else. It's also a tad dishonest. And much of it has to do with old bigotries turned on their head. Okay, like Asians. Do you really think that the Chinese and the Japanese and the Vietnamese have the same culture? But they look different. So they're in one group. Let me give you a little example. Don't worry, I'm on a soapbox. I'm just going to go on for a while. Let me give you a little example. The Japanese and the Germans had a long history of militarism, warlike, and eventually, for the Germans, it was a little bit longer history, but parts of Germany, of conquering other people. Okay? The Koreans and the Poles had a history of trying to maintain their independence and being conquered by other people. Okay? For a long time, the parts of Poland were conquered by Austria, which was a German-speaking country. There was a time when Poland was divided up between Austria, Russia, and where was Frederick the Great from? What? One of the other. It'll come to me. Getting old is terrible beats the alternative. Not Bavaria, but what? No. It was a German-speaking. Frederick. It doesn't matter. Okay, it'll come to me. Where Bismarck was from, Prussia. From Prussia, Austria, and they were conquered a lot. Same thing with the. So. And ultimately, after World War II, the Koreans and the Poles had to deal with this issue of being free for a while, and then it didn't last very long. The Soviets came in and took over Poland again. This issue of what do you do, right? And the Germans and the Japanese had to deal with the issues of no longer being conquering people, but trying to set up stable democracies in which they weren't threatening their neighbors. Both of them succeeded pretty well, by the way. Okay? So why do you assume that Japanese culture and Korean culture are different, are fundamentally the same in a way that Japanese and German culture aren't? Why do you do that? Or that the Germans are closer to the Poles than they are to the Japanese in the issues they've been dealing with for the last 50, 60, 70 years. Why do you assume that? Because of how they look? That's bigotry. What do you mean by Anglo culture? What do you mean by that? I remember when I was on at the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where I did my doctoral work, there was someone there. We were very good friends from the Valley. And he points out and he goes and he says, "Oh, you Anglos don't get it, right?" And Bill Paul, who told me that he was from Irish background. He told me that at his confirmation, 15 years of confirmation, right? They took him to the basement of the church and handed him a rifle that had belonged to, I think, his grandfather's great-grandfather, and said, "Passed from generation to generation in eternal battle until all Ireland is free." Because of the Northern Ireland still was under part of, he said it was, right? And a hate of the British. So the guy who said you Anglos, Bill stands up and he smashes on the table, and he was like a picture right out of a bad movie, red hair, blue eyes, right? Of what an Irishman looks like. And the veins are beating, and he screams, he says, and he points at him across there and says, "Don't don't you ever call me an Anglo, right? Because he spent all this shit in the... So afterwards I talked to him. He said, you know, I did it to make a point. He said, but I was only half kidding. To the other half of me really got upset. I mean, he did it to make a point. I mean, why is an Italian-American who knows a little bit of Italian but much prefers to speak English, but goes marching in the St. Anthony's Day parades and has Italian food at home, why is that person in a different culture or different ethnic group? How is that person different from a Mexican-American who prefers to speak English, knows some Spanish, right, but prefers to speak English, prefers to eat Mexican food and goes on Cinco de Mayo parades? Why are they in? Why is one an Anglo and one not? I don't get it. Can somebody explain it to me? I'm being serious. I don't get it. Or as Martin Luther King said, I told you about me and Martin Luther King, or my feelings about Martin Luther King. People should be judged by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. Okay? And in the end, all the stereotyping and assuming about people and dividing people up by what they look like or what their ethnic background is probably not a very good idea. And it does a disservice to those people. Each person needs to be judged as an individual. You'll see both with, when we get, go ahead. Go ahead.
Also, like what you said about how everybody is divided by color and stuff, and necessarily that's also not true because there's a lot of people who are, let's say, I have a friend who's Puerto Rican and he's born in Puerto Rico and he's whiter than me and has blue eyes.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. Look, you understand all this racial stuff is just pure baloney. It has no... How come... Do we talk about Roy Campanella and Franco Harris? No. Yeah. I mean, how come if your mother's from Mexico and your father's from Germany, how come you're Hispanic? Matter of fact, in some places, if your father has... I know one guy's a chiropractor and he has a German last name, right? And his wife is from Mexico. I mean, from Mexico, right? She came to America to study and she got a master's degree in something or other, so right? And they met when they were both students, and he's married to her. So that kid has this European last name. It's a German last name. How come... you know, that kid in general is, when they ask him, don't consider him Hispanic. Well, if the other way around, right? Oh, now you have a Hispanic last name, right? If the father had the Spanish last name and the mother had the German last name, then, I mean, it gets silly. It just gets silly. Here, go ahead.
I'm Mexican, and my entire life I've had people quizzing me. No, you're not Mexican. No, you have green eyes. Yeah. No, are both your parents? Both my parents are Mexican. You're not Mexican. My last name is Martinez. No. You know, it's like, how do you know who I am?
Yeah, and what's the and in the end, you need to be sort of judged by who. I mean, that's the other question. You know, how do you know? You have green eyes? They look blue to me.
They change. They're blue, sometimes gray, sometimes.
Hazel. That's like my son's eyes. Okay. I mean, how do you know? It's just the whole thing about judging people by their last names and it's dangerous. I will tell you this: in 1976, I believe, they had the Winter Olympics in Sarajevo, which at that time was Yugoslavia and still under communist pressure, and the ethnic tensions were kept down. You couldn't tell and one of the reasons was it was sort of the jewel of the communist empire. You know, it was the most modern industrial place there. Although they put out a car that didn't work, and it was very European. Okay, they spoke the same language called Serbo-Croatian, but the Serbs wrote the language who were Greek Orthodox in religion. They wrote it in the Cyrillic alphabet, the Greek alphabet, the Russian alphabet, right? And the Croats, who were Catholic, wrote it in the Latin alphabet. I don't know what the Muslims did. But you couldn't tell the difference. And it was a modern industrial country. They lived together, they worked together, they did things together, they were moving forward together. It was one of the few, because Yugoslavia had broken away from the Soviet sphere of influence, right? They had sort of thumbed their nose at the Soviet Union. There were actually there were Western influences there. It was sort of the jewel of Eastern Europe. Then the communism went away, and all these ethnic tensions started over. And people were living this. I don't understand it. People are killing each other. We're business partners. And that, to me, that frightens me. It frightens me, right? And America sort of had a deal which is you come here, you become an American, we're in this together, we appreciate American laws, American customs, we appreciate the freedoms that the Constitution gives us, which, by the way, comes from an English heritage, right? To much extent, right? The notions that came out of English thought and made it transferred to American, right? And if you want to keep your own ethnic culture, that's fine. It's up to you. Lord knows I'm committed to mine, right? Next time we're going to have a guest. One of the doctoral students is going to do the lecture because it's Jewish Holy Day. I'm not going to be here, okay? But it's still, and it frightens me, and I think it does a disservice, and it does a disservice to people because, right? I had one person here who came up to me, and there was a time when it turned out if you took kids where they were giving extra points to kids on standardized tests if they were from Mexican-American background because they didn't do as well in the standardized test, but if you added X number of points, it actually predicted their real performance. And I was talking about that, and one student comes up to me this many years ago, and you could see she was livid. She said, I don't need any favors from anyone about anything. She was right. She got an A in the course. She said, I don't want to hear it. I don't need it. I'm as smart as everyone else. And if I'm not as smart as something, it's nothing to do with what my last name is. Okay? I had one person come up to me, and he said, I don't know how he managed to pull it off in the United States, but his 4 grandparents were all from Czech background. I don't know if most of you know this, but in the 19th century, most of this area in Texas was settled by the Czechs and Germans, mid-19th century. Right? The Schlieterbahn, the Germans, right, and the Chili spiel, right, that they have, the Chili thing with the Czechs. He said, we settled this whole area of the country. If you go around and see a lot of Czech names in Germany, Rosenberg was the Germans, right, who settled here. He said, how come I'm just white? What happened to my ethnic group? What happened to contributions that we made? Right? There are some people who, from certain ethnic groups, who really don't like being labeled Hispanic. I had one student said, I don't want that label. I'm Cuban American, right? I've had it from other groups too. So these are the kind of things we need to ask ourselves about, whether it's a favor to our students to lump people into these groups, whether there's going away from where Americans were all in this together, right? And I got to tell you, I know this is dating the tape. I believe, I have my suspicions that a lot of what is going on with this quote-unquote illegal immigrants coming in, and it was just when I made this tape, it had been the time when they had marched on the street with the Mexican flag, right? Part of me wonders whether they would have done that 50 years ago. Okay, this has been going on a long time, people coming across the border and integrating into America without the proper papers, right? People even did that from Europe. They would pretend they were somebody's brother, but because they've gone to school in the United States, all these kids, and some of them have never even been to Mexico, or they certainly they lived here, but they're being told something different in the schools from what they used to be told. When we came, my mother was an immigrant. You're an American. George Bush is the father of your country. That's who you are, right? And I don't think those kids are being told that, and I think they ought to be. Right? You want to keep your ethnic heritage, you ought to be able to do it. There's nothing wrong. You should go to New York or Boston on St. Anthony's Day when there's Italian, there's a lot of good food too, right? The Italian Americans are parading down the streets, right? The interest in what goes on in Northern Ireland is much heavier among the Irish American community than among others, right? You can even see that in Boston. Kennedy has been very involved in that. Senator Kennedy, when those problems were going on. So it's not as though we've said you can't do that. But anyway, anybody want to make any more comments about this? Just be careful about judging people by their last names. The fact that someone says, oh, you can't be Mexican because she has light eyes. Think about what that is saying. Think about the stereotypes. Think about what we've done to ourselves like this. Oh, if you have to look this way or be this way or act this way, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, now I admit it might be a little easier for me. I belong to an ethnic group that cuts across all of those, right? There are black Jews and Hispanic Jews and white Jew. No, and I really identify that way. But even without that, it gives you a little bit of a leg up. Still, you need, the very fact that you have an example like this, that, if you're Mexican, you can't have light-colored eyes. Think about what we're doing to ourselves here, how we're judging people by stereotypes, often judging achievement by stereotypes. It's not just the basketball, right? I actually had worked with people, thank God they weren't on the faculty, but they were people who were teaching various things, who expressed shock that the best student in the class was black. What? Right? I mean, talk about stereotyping. Or one person who got a paper and the stuff, how can I put this? I don't know how the student got out of high school. Right? And this was a graduate student. The writing was illiterate. And then was stunned, say, by the way, this was a mea culpa. He said, I just expected the person to be black. And when he came in and said, he wasn't, right? It's horrible.
That's sad.
Say it again?
That's sad.
Yeah, it's sad, and it's frightening. It's frightening. And I think we sort of need to ask ourselves, I want to instinctively root for the American, right? And maybe it needs to go beyond that to all people. But these divisions that are put up by this quote-unquote multicultural stuff and other things, it's okay to respect other people's cultures. It's okay to say, I don't like that food. To teach that, it's important. I don't like that food. You may not like that food, but other people do, and they might like what you eat, although it's always around the food. To respect other people's religious feelings and their opinions. To understand there are a lot of people in the world who don't do things the way that you do. Let me say one other thing. Be very, very, very careful about the stuff you read in the textbooks about multiculturalism. I've seen a couple of these. There was one textbook. It had a page and a half. I think it was. I think I read 4 paragraphs. And there were 6 mistakes about Jewish culture. Right. So unless and then there were some totally incomprehensible things that nobody can. So unless I figure the person is out to get to Jews, which I don't think so, I had to assume that there are a lot of mistakes about all the other cultures in there too, because I didn't know them, but I should. So be very, very careful. You're going to have to ask yourself, what do I know about other people's cultures? It's nice to have people come in and talk, but we need an atmosphere not only of tolerance, but of in this together. All right, I'm going to get off that soapbox. The problem, let's go back here. This becomes the problem with stage 3, okay? Even though, what happens when you have groups that don't agree on the rules? I'll give you a story, right? When I first got here to Houston 30 years ago, it was so long ago that Iran and Israel were getting along, right? It was, right? There was an Iranian, you can come back to me, there was an Iranian and Israeli student in the front office of the department. That was called the Foundation of Education Department. I'll never forget this. The Israeli student, this was his 2nd year there, and the Iranian had just come to America to study. And they're talking about Christmas. And what happens on Christmas? Now, the Israeli was from Tel Aviv. If you live in Tel Aviv, Christmas, you don't think about it, right? Obviously, there's a lot going on in Christmas in Jerusalem, but I remember I was living outside of Tel Aviv, a place north of Tel Aviv in Nahariya. I said, you know what, I'm going to go to Christmas. I'm going to go and see Christmas in Jerusalem. I want to see it. All the pilgrims coming. And then they get on the radio and on the television. They said, we have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Christian pilgrims. And they lay it on. Some of them have been saving for years to come to be at the Church of the Nativity and other Christian holy spots on Christmas Eve. There's not room for all of them. If you're a Jewish or a Muslim, you want to go there and take up one of their spots just because you're a curious tourist? You really going to go do that? They just lay it on, such a guilt trip. They just say, you know what? And then they show people. Here's so-and-so who's just been saving her money all her life, lives in a small town in Norway, and finally has enough, or wherever it was, right? Finally has enough money. Here's this group from a small town in the United States. I remember them. So you don't go. And it just goes, you don't think about it. You don't see it. Okay, this guy from Iran was from a small town. He said he barely heard of Christianity. He hardly knew what Christians were. Then you come here, you don't realize because you live with it. And in 3 weeks, the lights and the songs and the trees, and it's something spectacular. When I lived in Israel for 5 years, I came back and it stunned me. Wow, it's something just unbelievable. Right? It really, you get used to it after a while, you get cynical about it, but it really is quite amazing. All of a sudden you walk into the gallery and there's a Christmas tree 50 feet high standing in the middle of the skating rink, and it's decorated. It really is beautiful stuff if you're away from it for a while. And they were stunned by it. They had never seen it. Right? And in Jerusalem, it's not like that on Christmas. It's mostly celebrated with fruits and things like that. In any case, so they're talking, and the Israeli is talking about, how he had the same feeling when we first came. All of a sudden the secretary is from a small town somewhere, I don't remember. It hit her. She said, you guys don't celebrate Christmas? And at that time we had 2 rooms. They said, no. I said, well, but everybody celebrates Christmas. So the guy from Iran, obviously they're talking, this guy from Iran said, well, I barely even heard of Christmas before I got here. And she just, it astounded her. She said, but it's such a beautiful holiday. I mean, and they looked, they didn't know what to say. Finally, the Israeli said, well, we have our own holidays, right? He just didn't know what to say. It was just... So and of course for her it was just, but in the end, what do you mean you're not like that? You have to be like that. You have to do it. And when you get into battles, the only thing to do is to fight and to war and to label. So the question becomes, if you have a society as complex as ours, what do you do? What do you do if you don't have that going on? What do you do if you run into the inevitable? And by the way, in the end here, right? If I'm a witness to something and I see, right, my cousin smack in to the back end of a parked car, right, of someone I don't know, and I'm called in court, I say, oh no, not a parked car, at a traffic light, and I watch it, I say, what's today? Is she day? I saw her, she backed into the car, right? Because it's my cousin. It's my cousin, right? This is where clan warfare come from at stage 3. Oh. The wheel fell off of your cart and ran into my cousin's house and smashed up the front door. I go and kill your cow. Oh, really? So now your uncle goes and burns down my house, right? So my brother goes and shoots up me before, you've got this warfare, clans, inside, outside, ethnic battles. That's what frightens me so much about multiculturalism going awry. Tolerance, one thing, but saying, you're this culture, we're that culture, never the twain shall meet, it's frightening. So how do you get around it? How do you get around it if you don't have everybody agreeing on everything? So Kohlberg says, let's go up here, stage 4, what he calls conventional reasoning. Now, morality consists of following the law and abiding by legal agreements. An understanding of contractual obligations develops. It becomes impersonal. Okay? And disagreements are settled by going to court. Now, come back to me if you can. Now, it's no longer, well, we just all agree. You have to wear Vans, and you have to like this music, and you have to wear this kind of clothing, and you have to like whatever it is. Now there are laws that are set down, okay? And you settle disagreements by going to court. In the Western tradition, Western religious tradition, what's sort of the first great tradition of these are the laws? This is what you do, and this is what you don't do. Go ahead.
The 10 Commandments?
The 10 Commandments, right. Now you have to do a little thinking about it. Which commandment makes it clear that we are going to settle disputes by going to court?
Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor.
Exactly. Very good, very good. I'm proud of you. That's good. False witness, we're going to be a witness in the closet. And remember, it's the last one before not coveting, right? That's sort of emotional. But after you have all the things you're supposed to do and not do it, and none of this is going to work. None of this is going to work if you don't tell the income person, okay? Did you see who stole what? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I saw. I was a witness. I don't know who it was, but she didn't take it. Of course, she's my cousin. So I saw her take it. She stole from someone I hate, right? Besides, she stole it from one of them. We're this and we're that. We're the Hatfields, they're the McCoys, or whatever, right? No, you can't do that. It's impersonal. The law is over and above any particular person. Okay? So following proper legal procedures is a fundamental part of morality. Okay? So now, if I make a commitment to someone, of course, hopefully I wouldn't say, I'll do your math homework, I'll do your English homework if you do my math homework, right? And we make a bargain, a deal's a deal. You have to abide by a contract. Okay? And if I make a deal to sell someone my house, and then I find out, oh, she's one of them. In my case, a Yankee fan. I don't want to sell my house to Yankee fans. Okay? No, it's too late. You signed it, a deal's a deal. Okay? Anybody here like the Yankees? Out. You've had the course already. There's no point. Have a Yankee fan here? Where? Raise your hand there. Here. Get in the picture. Anybody see her? Get in the picture. Move over more. Move behind him. Where is she? There she is. There's our Yankee fan. Okay, when you see her, go boo. All right? Okay. You understand what I'm saying? No, it's not personal. You have to do it. And you have to abide by the law. One time, I was on a jury. It was a civil thing. Someone had sold property to someone else, right? A private individual, obviously didn't have a lot of money, had sold property to a corporation. His land jutted up against theirs, and they bought it they were into pipes, I guess. They needed to store pipes. And then he tried to get out of it. He wanted to claim that he was pushed into it, but clearly he had not asked his wife, and she was mad at him. So he wanted she didn't testify, but the story came out. I was number 24, the first 24 jurors, and you can exercise bumps, and all of a sudden the 3 or 4 people in front of me were all bumped, and I got on there. Later, we found for the company, and they really, this guy he said, the pipes are coming, I got to have the land, right? I saw the defense attorney in the parking lot. And I said to him, are you the one who bumped to get me on a jury? He said, yeah. I said, why? He said, well, I figure you're a professor, and professors have a reputation of being super liberals, and I thought you might, for the little guy. Stereotypes. And then I said to him, I knew the family, I said, what about the fact that we're both Jews? And the attorney for the company wasn't. He said, well, that wasn't a major consideration, but I figured it wouldn't hurt. I knew this guy's family. He didn't know me, but I knew his family, so I knew he was Jewish. And I obviously have a stereotypical. It bothered me. It bothered me, right? But of course, I didn't act that way. It was clear, right, that the company, what had happened. A deal was a deal. And matter of fact, the guy even offered to pay 20% more for the land. He was desperate for it. He lost, and the guy said, in order for us not to appeal, he'll pay us the extra 20% anyway. So that's standard procedure, right? So he figured, So now it becomes laws. It's over and over. There's no personal morality. Personal morality is not what counts. Come back to me for a second. Personal ties are not what counts. A deal's a deal. You go in there. Interestingly enough, in the Ten Commandments, if you look, there's a reiteration of the laws in Leviticus. And judges are told how to act, and they're told, Leviticus 19, I think, if you're interested. Don't hold me to that, but it's somewhere in the middle there. Don't favor the rich because they have power. Don't favor the poor because you feel sorry for them. You have to be a just judge. You have to act according to justice. One of the most interesting things about the Ten Commandments, and this is a key, is that people have said there was a code called the Hammurabic Code. Hammurabi was the king of Mesopotamia, right, who put out a code like that, but the king was exempt from the rules. Okay? The king was exempt from the law. Well, in Moses' code, the king is also exempt from the laws. But who's the king? God's the king. So no human is exempt from the law, right? Just because you're the president doesn't mean that you're above the laws. We saw when Clinton got impeached, right? Or when Nixon was resigned because they were going to it was clear he was going to be, there were things for prosecutions, right? And Ford, in the end, pardoned him because he said these trials are going to go on forever. People were mad at him, but in retrospect, he may have made the right decision. I don't want to get into that now. So in the end, what happens here is that at stage 4 morality, no one's above the law. We used to say, when I was a kid, we used to say, in the United States, we're a government of laws, not of men. And now we'd have to say people, right? It doesn't matter who you are. You're all equal before the eyes of the law, right? And it upsets a lot of people, me included, that, if you have a lot of money and you can afford a lawyer, and some of these lawyers, it's not because they're better lawyers, but because they can. I mean, if you anybody watch Matlock? Who doesn't like Matlock? Oh, this is going to be good. Out. You're really on my list. A Yankee fan doesn't like it either. If you watch Matlock, you can see a lot of what he does. He has that private investigator. Well, most lawyers don't have enough money to hire private investigators, or the people, they don't do it, right? You have to pay for that investigator. It's not so easy. And he's honest about it. He charges through the nose, Matlock. He charges me costs to hire him. Once in a while, he does it for free because he will be a good guy. But these are the kinds of things, and it bothers some people. Ultimately, we came to the conclusion you have to have a lawyer. If you can't afford a lawyer, the state has to appoint one for you. Right? And there's a lot of upset about how much the public defenders, their caseloads are overwhelming. You watch Law and Order. Oh, those public defenders, sometimes they're handling so many cases. It's not their fault, right? That it's just impossible to give the kind of attention a private attorney will give to one client who's paying him a fortune. But these are the kinds of things, equal before the law. You'll notice that justice, the thing of justice when she's holding up the scales and she's blind, right? Holding up the scale and she's blind. It doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, or what your ethnic background is. It's legality, and it's settling things by court. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a jet or a shark, whether you're this or that. You got a dispute, take it to court peacefully. There's a way now to settle disputes even among people who may not share common ethnic backgrounds or common values or common whatever. Okay, and this is extraordinarily important, right? It's hard to get away from. I hope most of you do root for the Americans when you're watching, right? Maybe see the American baseball team at this last Olympics. Made me want to cry. They were lousy. Lousy. Anyway, that's a different story. Okay? I'm still upset about the 72 Olympics, I think it was, 76, where they stole the basketball championship from the Americans. They had it 3 seconds, the Soviets won. But in any case, these are the kinds of things we need to think about. Okay? The law. Now, there's one problem. I just want to start to get into it. Let me say that next week we're going to have to do the end of Kohlberg afterwards. But since I'm a Piaget and I believe in holism, just leave blank page in your notes. Next time we'll start on humanism. I won't be here. Lee Sterling will be here. He, as I said, he knows humanism very well, better than I do. Certainly aspects of it I don't know. But what is the problem with saying what's legal is moral? We already went into this at the beginning of the discussion. Who can think of things that are or were legal in the United States, for instance, let's stick here, or other countries, that you consider immoral?
Owning people?
Owning people. How's that for a start? Slavery. If you read Huckleberry Finn, one of the little digs that Twain puts in there is that Huck is always feeling guilty because it's illegal to help a slave escape. And he's showing how foolish it is. Okay? What about segregation? Right? Go ahead, say it again.
Prohibition.
Prohibition, there you go. That's, And interestingly enough, there are people who say that one of the quickest ways to undermine the law is to make laws that you know people won't obey. Okay? And then people say, well, the law's stupid anyway. You can get away with it, right? There are people, arch conservatives, who have serious reservations about our drug laws for that reason. William F. Buckley was one of them. He wrote a thing about legalizing heroin as a starter. He said because it just destroys the whole notion of obeying the law, right? That's why most of you, like, we all have areas like that. I'm sure if I were to charge you $1 for every time you broke the traffic laws, like not putting on your traffic signal when you change lanes or make a turn, you would all wind up in the streets with not a penny to your name, right? And owing me $500,000 or more each, right? You've done it thousands and thousands of times, right? So, but you know, there's a limit. We know that, right? You don't go through a neighborhood going 60 miles an hour. So those are the kinds of things we need to think about. So in the end, the question becomes, what do you do when what's legal you may consider to be immoral, okay? And there's another problem. Sometimes people appeal to different laws. For instance, there was a law, I can't remember where it was, New Hampshire, West Virginia. You had to get up and pledge allegiance to the flag. That was a law of the state. Right? Seventh-day Adventists said no. I don't know too much about their religion, but I believe they're not allowed to pledge allegiance to anyone but God, something like this. So they said, no, we're not going to do it. They're appealing to a different law, which is the biblical law. You know that old story, could God get tenure in a university as a professor? The answer is no. First of all, what's he written lately? And secondly, what he wrote is so many different interpretations that we're not sure what's going on anyway. I think the Bible, from the Bible spring how many different religions, right? But anyway, so in any case, these are people appealing to two different laws. One said, this is the law of the land, the law of the state. And the other one said, no, this is the law of God. And it goes on today. There are people, for instance, religious schools that won't let state inspectors in. Right? There was one person who ran across a state line because he was going to be arrested, and the governor of the other state wouldn't extradite him. He said, I think he's right. So it becomes very difficult. In the United States, we have something interesting, which is we have a supreme law of the land. The Constitution. We have a court interpreting it. Of course, in 1897, they say segregation's legal. In 1954, they say it's illegal. But in any case, what happened with that one, that was an easy one. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the law of the state is illegal. You can't force people to do things like that against their religion. But in the Army, for instance, there are still, for instance, people have religion, we have to wear something, a headgear. The Army said, no, can't do it. We have an Army uniform. So it becomes, and there are some people who don't go to the Army for that. Career officers who will drop out because of that, or decide not to make the Army their career because of that. So the question becomes, is there some way to get an ultimate morality? And let me just say that. Let me just go to the PowerPoint now. The answer is, we're going to go back to the individual and a concept of individual rights, and saying that a political system, we're back to the individual, but not back to the individual saying, well, if it's good for me, it's moral. Now we're going to have morality, individual rights, and we're going to have a political system that is going to tell us that we're going to have to say, we're going to judge the morality of that system by the extent to which it does or does not protect individual rights, right? And treat all people as having these rights. Okay? What is moral, then, is what is just. And now, come back to me for a second, now we're able to say, look, I don't have to worry about laws that put one group above another, or laws that say some people have rights and some people don't. Okay? Or laws that say you can buy from these people but not from those people. Right? From Nazi Germany, they passed a law before they started all the murdering. You can't go into stores where, you know, owned by Jews, that kind of thing. So I know one guy, he said, I met him in Israel, he said, they saved, the Nazis saved my life. He said, they made that law, and I said, what am I going to do for a living? Michael Medved, you ever hear him? He's a movie critic. They did the same thing to his grandfather. So left. few years later, he said, everybody in my town was murdered. So, but basically, you know, you're not supposed to do that. Everyone's rights are equal. And laws are judged by the equality with which you have them. So if you have a law, the Fugitive Slave Act, that says it's illegal to help a slave help a slave escape, it doesn't matter. You're allowed. The question is that law moral by the question of equal rights. So the next time we talk about Coburg, we'll talk about post-conventional reasoning, which talks about rights. We'll talk a little bit about how all this stuff applies to schools, because remember, you have your own reasoning too about the kids. And then we'll talk about, but next week we're going to start on Maslow, okay? And you'll be getting introduction. I'm still bargaining with Lee whether he's going to, dickering with whether he's going to finish it or I'm going to finish it, and then that'll be it for the course. Okay, see you in a little while.